The Buffalo Bills moved to 2-0 on the season with a dominant win over the New York Jets this week on the Wandering Buffalo podcast.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FAMBase podcast network. My name is Justin, and I am your host, and here to celebrate another Buffalo Bills win. I intentionally say this as a dominating win in this cold intro here. Just want to get this out of the way early. There was a ton of conversation in this game with Tony Romo and some of the conversation after the game about like the Bills playing down to their competition, all this nonsense. And for me, it's super hard to kind of acknowledge it with Tony Romo because he is obviously there watching the game. But some of the discourse after the game of, it being closer than it should with the Jets, anybody saying anything like that, I question whether or not they actually watched the game. This was a dominating performance, kind of on all phases of the ball. A really enjoyable game to watch as a relaxing afternoon game. For this game, living in Western New York, our days are numbered of the nice weather, so for this game, my wife and I took the TV outside, watched it on the back patio, just straight relaxing all the way through. Within about 10 minutes of the game, it from that point on, it never really felt close. It was just kind of the Bills. Yeah, they got a little bit more conservative, but they were just kind of doing what they had to do to win this game. And I think I'll start out there with something that I liked about this game is the Bills being able to be multiple and win in different ways. And, having Josh Allen as your quarterback, it's awesome having the games where he throws for 5 touchdowns and 400 yards and runs for another 6. Don't get me wrong. Love watching that. But I think there's a maturity to this football team of just because we, theoretically could go score 70, we don't have to. There's no need to put extra looks on film. There's no need to take higher risks with slinging the ball all over the yard. This was a game where James Cook was super effective, and they just continued to lean into James Cook. The Bills don't care about Josh Allen in fantasy. This is a game where if you look at the box score, 14 to 25, 150 yards, no touchdowns. He kind of got the ball rolling with a 40-something yard run. But outside of that, this was a game where we didn't have to ask for a ton from Josh Allen. And with Josh Allen, the receiver core, I think they still made timely plays. I think they still made important plays. But this game was about the run game, and in particular, James Cook. 21 carries, 130-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. My favorite thing in this game, not only this crazy 40-something yard run, where he's an acrobat dancing out of all kinds of leg tackles and shows his breakaway speed to get into the end zone. It was how he scored. And this is something that I've joked about in his contract negotiations. Not sure if I ever said it on this show or not, but I said that the Bills should put into his contract that he was no longer allowed to flip into the end zone. And for me, it's fun. I love to see the guys having fun. But he never landed on his feet or anything. There was always some awkward lands on his back. And I was just waiting for the day that, Cook pops up on an injury report because he flipped into the end zone. So my favorite thing about that really amazing breakaway long touchdown was that he didn't flip into the end zone. Love to see that. In this game, I continue to like what I'm seeing from the tight ends. There were the drops coming back for Dawson Knox. I'd like to see that get cleaned up again. But overall, for kind of how they work in concert with each other, of having timely, effective roles in this offense, and they're very clearly defined. And Kincaid being the receiving option, Knox kind of being your hybrid, and Spencer Hawes just continuing to be a beast in the blocking portion of the offense. And yeah, he had one catch for 5 yards in this one too. But what he's able to bring to the position as a blocker and how they're able to use that kind of in lieu of having Alec Anderson come in as the jumbo tight end. Not that we haven't still seen that occasionally, but I feel like that's going to set up looks for down the line of, oh, they're going jumbo package, whatever, 3 tight ends, and, teams start keying in on the run game there, and, kind of lose sight of the fact that you have really good receiving profiles, in particular with Kincaid, but also with Knox. And, a game like this or somewhere down the season, or you kind of lulled to sleep a little bit with the run game, and you run a play action out of this and somebody's streaking down the sideline and you hit a big one. I feel like it's something that we're going to see a lot of early and often in the season. And that's going to be a nice setup for things that you want to do down the line. Offensively, not really a ton to point to in this game for something that you didn't like. I have some issues with the Keon Coleman offensive pass interference. I thought that was kind of really ticky-tack call. I think part of the issue with this is with Keon Coleman's skill set. I think you're going to get some of these flags, and some of them, may be more tangible than others. I didn't think it was a flag. I thought it was, the cornerback kind of getting a little tied up, and, there's an extended arm. So I think it was more the cornerback just kind of tripping over themselves than it was Keon Coleman doing it. It's something that's going to come with the territory of the skill set. Other thing I didn't like a ton in this game, and kind of going back to week 1 as well, is just what I've seen out of Ray Davis thus far. And it's been a very limited sample size. So I'm not going to, sky is falling on our RB2 or anything like that. But I feel like he's not really playing within his skill set as much, and he's trying to do a little more of the dancing. And what looked so nice from him in year 1 was the one cut, getting downhill and kind of thumping people up. So hopefully we kind of see a return to that with Ray Davis. Where I'll leave off on the offense here is really enjoying what I saw from Elijah Moore. And, by transitive property, I guess, something I didn't like was Curtis Samuel being inactive again. And that really just comes down to the price tag of, you have your second most expensive player in the receiver room not able to get a jersey on game day. But I think kind of in this game, I saw for the first time that the role that I was anticipating Curtis Samuel having going back to last year. And I got really excited. I like Curtis Samuel as a player. It was one of these ones of if they can stay healthy, which we haven't seen a ton of. I got excited for him again, ramping up tail end of last season, starting to make some plays. And right now, it feels like it's Elijah Moore's job to lose. And the role that I see for this player is kind of like I want to say like a better version of Isaiah McKenzie. Of I don't need this player to be, super high volume, 10 touches a game, all that kind of stuff. I'm looking for the player to have unlimited touches because there is a pecking order ahead. Maybe you get 3 to 5 touches again a game, but what do you do with those touches? And in this game, Elijah Moore had one reception. That one came with the Mitch Trubisky popping in off the bench after Josh Allen, I'll call it, breaks his nose. I haven't really gotten a clear answer on that yet, but shout out to Mitch Trubisky coming in cold, slinging a 31-yard touch or 31-yard completion to Elijah Moore. He had I guess it goes down as a run play, but the little touch pass handoff, jet sweep around the edge that he gets in for a touchdown with. And then the third touch that he had was for a first down. And these were just kind of manufactured. 2 of those were manufactured touches. Get it to a speed guy, go make something happen. And I think kind of that X factor gadget type guy has been a little bit missing in this offense. And in a world where it was kind of Curtis Samuel and Elijah duking it out for that type of role, it appears Elijah Moore has the upper hand right now. And I don't know what the path is to Curtis Samuel getting playing time right now, barring any injuries, in that I feel like that role is being covered right now, but it's also hard to ignore if we have a healthy Curtis Samuel, some of the stuff that he brought to the table in the tail end of the season last year. So I think that's going to be super interesting to see how it plays out. Does it end up being more of a battle between Curtis Samuel and Tyrell Shavers? I don't really see it that way, just with what Shavers brings for you on special teams. So I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on, as the season goes forward. Is there going to be maybe some opportunities where, the Bills have a game where they think that they should be pretty capable of winning, and they decide to address Curtis Samuel that day and give Elijah Moore the week off? I don't know how it's going to all work out, but the limited snaps, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing from Elijah Moore. We'll touch again on the Josh Allen getting smacked in the nose. You don't love to see that live. It's kind of this initial burst of panic of, Josh Allen sprinting off the side and he's kind of gushing blood. And then as the moment passes a little bit, the immediate thought goes to, worst case scenario here, maybe a broken nose. And as soon as I get that thought in my head, like, okay, that's not keeping Josh Allen out. And, as we get the injury report today, I believe he wasn't even listed. We did find out that he's going to be rocking a visor, which is pretty sweet anyways. So provided that it's not affecting his breathing or anything like that, I don't expect this to be anything that really limits him. The last thing I'll say offensively about this game that I really enjoyed is just kind of the pacing of the game and the way that the Bills were able to control the game script. Ends up being a game that it looks a little bit closer on the scoreboard than it was, but we're talking a game where, in particular for this week, back-to-back division rivals, you're taking on the Dolphins on a short week coming up for a Thursday night game, and you're talking most of the fourth quarter in this game. We're getting to rest a bunch of guys. We're seeing Josh Allen take some of the fourth quarter off. We saw Ray Davis get in there. These little things kind of add up over the course of the season when you're talking about load management and the progressive fatigue and just a full quarter of more opportunities for guys to go down with injuries. So, for it to be a 30-10, super comfortable feeling win, I'll take that every day of the week. If it means we get to pull some of our guys at the end, we get to get some of the depth pieces, some meaningful snaps that can come in handy if injuries happen down the road. And like I said, the Bills don't care about our fantasy teams. They don't care about running up the score. And I think a game like this, and this kind of goes back to last year for me, I think it's a game where ultimately, like, if Josh Allen gets an MVP, he gets an MVP, but they're not going to make him play a full four quarters if it's not necessary so he can get a couple more touchdowns. They're going to do what it takes to win the games, and they're going to get out of there. And, I'll enjoy the score running up when I play with the Bills in Madden, and Josh is throwing 5 touchdowns every week. But for the practicality, the logistics, all the inner workings of getting through a long season where everybody's getting some sort of injuries, it's a wonderful feeling to have the starters be able to sit on the sidelines to finish out the game. And moving over to the defensive side of the ball, again, another area where the Bills dominated in this game. And it even looks a little bit closer because really this game was much more of a 30-3 game. The Jets are able to get into the end zone, and the Bills are bringing in backups. We have our depth getting in there, again, getting meaningful snaps and some playing time. And yeah, it's really nice to hold a team to 3 points the whole game. But again, I'm very okay with giving up an extra 7 points in this game to be able to get the starters a little bit of extra rest, a little head start on a short week. And one of the guys that highlights that for me is Joey Bosa. And initially I had cautious optimism about Joey Bosa, and the conversation was always, if he can stay healthy. And for me, another layer of that was, he's getting a little bit older. He has dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his time in the league. Kind of, how is that all added up? And knowing that he was a premier pass rusher in this league, if we can get him healthy for a full season, is he a step down from that? Is he still a premier pass rusher? And this game, he went bananas. And I love this, after the game, where I guess on the sideline, Josh Allen told him to get his strip sack and give him the ball back. And it's exactly what he went out and did. He got a strip sack, forced a fumble. Bills get the ball right back on offense. And it was the Jets had the ball first drive. They punted. Bills score a touchdown. Jets first play back on offense. Strip sack, turnover. And to me, that was kind of that was kind of the juncture of the game where it was smooth sailing from then on. And it's just really great to see Bosa be able to have a game like that. There was another part where he was like mic'd up and talking about the Jets had a tight end trying to block him one on one, and he just absolutely cooked him. So again, I've done this a lot, drawing a lot of parallels to the signing of Von Miller and this being a lower risk version of that. But very similar to when the Bills brought in Von Miller, you were getting that high impact player. He was still playing as a premier edge, and an unfortunate injury kind of brought that story to a close. But when we're talking about ways to keep Bosa healthy, because we want to see him do all this in January, hopefully February, you're already playing on a team that manages reps, that likes to rotate. They rotate players a ton to limit snap counts. And then to have a game like this where you don't need him playing well into the fourth quarter. The game's in hand. Cool. Mitigate the chances for players getting injured, which I love to see. The defense in general, week 1 to week 2, it looks like a completely different unit. And I know that we're going from the caliber of the Ravens and them being in the conversation as a very, very real Super Bowl contender. And then you're going to the Jets, who, you know, I guess I got to kind of try to figure out what I think of Pittsburgh now, between what the Jets offense was able to do against Pittsburgh, who typically has a pretty good defense, and then what the Bills were able to do. I think the realistic nature of this defense is it's going to fall somewhere in between week 1 and week 2. And like I said, I don't anticipate this unit playing their best ball until, well into November, December. There's a lot of new, there's a lot of young. Even some of, a guy like Cole Bishop, like, yeah, he's in year 2, but his rookie year missed a ton of time, didn't really play much till the tail end of the season. Trey White in his first game back with the Bills. We haven't seen Max Hairston yet. Taron Johnson was out in this game. Jordan Hancock hasn't been healthy. Ed Oliver injured. So there's a ton of stuff that still needs to come together for this game. But I thought the major difference was just kind of the willingness, the physicality that we saw against the Jets that we didn't really see against the Ravens. And again, I know Derrick Henry, Lamar, it's a whole different animal. But week 1, I thought we were seeing, some kind of business decisions type football. And McDermott even came out after the game and said, we're gonna have a hard practice on Wednesday. And I thought it was very evident in this game. There was more physicality. There was more willingness to stick your face in there, and just an all around better performance on defense. And shout out to Christian Benford for his one really tough tackle on Breece Hall, able to get him down, just short of the first down marker. Forces a punt in that situation. Trey White, just like we've always talked about since Trey White has ever been a Bill, his willingness to to get physical and be, super effective and a strong tackler. Kidding, of course. These are not the attributes that we usually, assign to Trey White, but I thought he was great in run support in this game. I thought the linebackers looked better. I thought for the young defensive tackles in Sanders and Deion Walker, I think it's easy for them to kind of get lost in the shuffle without their names being called a ton. But in watching this game back, I would say that they were good in this game. They looked to me, they were holding their assignments, they were holding their gaps. doing what you asked them to do, and a team that gave up just an absolute boatload of yards against the Ravens in week 1. Brees, Brees Hall and Justin Fields are also a pretty formidable, you know, running back quarterback duo as far as running the ball goes. And you have them to a total of about 80 yards between the two of them. And you have almost 30 of that coming on one from Fields and 12 of that coming from Brees Hall on one carry. So, I mean, you're talking outside of those, a total of 13 touches for 40 something yards. I'm not a math guy, but I think the important thing here, and yes, you don't have the same threat throwing the ball from Justin Fields as you do from Lamar. So yes, easier to key in on the run game. But I think it's something that they put tape out there week 1 about them being susceptible in the run game. And to come back in week 2 and just completely kind of shut the door on that, at least for this game, I thought was a really nice, week to week change up there. Kind of wrapping up as we're looking forward to the Miami Dolphins. A couple injury notes. We saw Milano, it looks like he had a pectoral injury in this game. McDermott's press conference today already ruled him out for the game against the Dolphins. His press conference yesterday, he said that he wouldn't rule out practice today, but he also wouldn't rule out long-term injury. Totally get why we get coach speak on injuries, but it's really frustrating trying to speculate what's going on. I always kind of imagined as soon as he popped up, it was going to be a long shot to play this week against the Dolphins on a short week. But we have the official word he's not going to be playing this week. And then Ed Oliver also already ruled out for this game as he's still, working back from that ankle injury. Again, I think any injuries we see at this juncture of the season, especially with a seemingly, kind of soft schedule coming up, I think we're going to see everything aired on the side of caution. Like I said, I prefer them taking this approach early in the season. It's a team that you expect to be in the playoffs. You want to be playing your best ball down the stretch. And a major part of that has plagued us over the last few years is just critical injuries going into the playoffs. So something to keep an eye on, particular for me with Milano. The pec injuries can be a little bit scary, but it's not an immediate IR. So I guess that's kind of a good thing to see. Coming up, like I said, we have the Miami Dolphins, and this is an interesting game to me. We see Miami as a team. Week 1 just looked absolutely terrible. Week 2, they were able to get the offense on track a little bit, but some really weird end of game sequences from them. And if you haven't seen this, go watch it. Is Achan looking like he has a go-ahead touchdown? There's a review for the play, and in the review, he steps out of bounds. So during this whole period of the play being reviewed, the Dolphins don't have the next play ready to go. And end up coming out of this review, there was a delay of game, play clock running down. They have to break the huddle so they can get their substitutions in. There's confusions on alignments, and it ends up being the last play of the game is, again, looks like confusion getting the play call in and alignment issues. They barely get the snap off again, and it ends in a way that I've seen a lot of games end for the Dolphins with Tua, of a fourth down play with the game on the line and not even attempting to get the ball out. He takes a sack and the game ends that way. All that to say, I think that we're going to get a very desperate team in Miami this week. And I think you do have the benefits of, on a short week, again, a lot of our starters were resting to end this game versus, Miami coming in that was fighting tooth and nail till the end of the game against the Patriots. But I think you're looking at a very realistic situation in Miami where Mike McDaniels might be coaching for his job. And I know it's super early in the season, but to come out week one, as bad as that team looked, to lose in dramatic fashion against the Patriots and not even really just a terrible end of game sequence. And it just feels like he's lost the locker room. It feels like this could be the nail in the coffin if the Dolphins aren't able to get a win this week. So I would fully expect, some weird stuff from the Dolphins. Some, extra gutsy going for it on fourth down. Maybe the punt fake, field goal fake. I don't know what it's going to be, but I predict that this time next week we're going to be talking about something screwy Miami tried to do to pull one over on the Bills to have a chance. And I will say, as much as the Bills have dominated the Dolphins, and I don't go into this game with a ton of concern about them handling business. I think Miami's secondary in particular is very beat up. I think the Bills offense should be able to do what they want. This is a team in Miami that if they can get that offense on track and have the track meet that they want with, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, just the speed that they have is kind of a mismatch versus the amount of speed the Bills have on defense. So again, not overly concerned with this Dolphins opponent, but I think we do need to be mindful of how electric that offense can be if they get on track and, acknowledge that this is an 0-2 team coming in on a short week with stink all over them and desperation of, people might be playing for jobs this week. So I don't get overly concerned with like the trap game type of mindset of, the Bills looking past an opponent because they got something else coming up or they just assume a win. I think that's something that we saw more in the past. I think under McDermott and some of this player leadership, and you see it with Joe Brady every week, the 1-0 posts. I think it's very much a team that stays kind of grounded and in the moment and takes everything one game at a time. So I don't really buy into the notion of a trap game in that I don't think the Bills are going to prepare any different with that type of mindset, if that makes sense. But I do think that there's an aspect of this game that you got to be kind of prepared for the wild card weird stuff because, like I said, this is going to be a desperate team. Not only Mike McDaniels possibly coaching for his job, but I mean, bunch of competitive dudes on that Miami Dolphins team that want to win games, and you go 0-3 to start the season, and it's a pretty substantial hole to dig out to have meaningful games for the remainder of the season. So, like I said, I do predict the Bills win. Maybe it maybe a bit of a closer game than some of us anticipate based on what we've seen out of the Dolphins in the first 2 weeks. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. As always, would love it if you like, share, subscribe, tell a friend about the show. Always enjoy hearing from you if you drop something in the comments. We're going to be back next week, same time, discussing this, hopefully, win against the Miami Dolphins. So we will see you then. Until then, and as always, go Bills.